Morbidly Beautiful Radio. We horror.
Did you hear the one about the man who can't be destroyed? He was buried alive.
What more can you do to a human being? This is inhuman. He's got to be crushed just under the weight of that much dirt.
He was set on fire.
What the hell is going on? God! The cat's gets on fire!
They carried him away. But he keeps coming back. Don't be afraid. Be terrified. As I lay me down to sleep, I pray my soul is mine to keep. My soul can never step outside this bed, never into all the evil. Now back from the dead.
Are you scared?
Be here.
And welcome to another episode of the Calling Hours Horror Podcast on Morbidly Beautiful Radio. Once again, it is I, your head undertaker, the dead man Michael Jones of MorbidlyBeautiful.com, Coffin Cuties Magazine, and Digital Dead Magazine. It's time for another fantastic episode, ladies and gentlemen, and we have a little bit of news. As of last Friday, we are officially syndicated both nationally and internationally on Mile High Radio. So if you can't catch us on Tuesday nights, you can catch us Friday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 on the West Coast. So make sure to check us out one or both nights. It's going to be a great episode, as I had stated before. We are going to be talking about all of the controversy that is surrounding YouTube these days. And what I mean by that is we are going to be discussing YouTube's new algorithm that is demonetizing many horror content related pages. We'll also be discussing how advertisers view content and possible ideas on how YouTube could be sued over their inconsistent methods of enforcing their policies. My guest this evening to talk about that will be Morbidly Beautiful journalist and HorrorTuber Vicky Cirello, Filmmaker Ian Messenger, who is known for Friday the 13th Revenant and Friday the 13th Legacy shorts, both of which are on YouTube, and HorrorTuber Lamont Smith, better known as Horror Miser Monty G. Make sure to stay tuned until 8:30 this evening to hear that interview. I think it's a very important topic, and once again, I know it seems like I'm pointing out that the horror industry in particular is being picked on, and you know, people who put content on YouTube need to let them know how this is affecting them. You know, I see bootleg movies up there all the time. I see content that is quite extreme and much worse than anything artistic that anyone is putting up as an artist. So hopefully some ears at YouTube will hear this show, and maybe we can get some dialogue going. I wouldn't mind on a future episode having someone from YouTube come on and try to explain why this is happening, it seems, in particular to horror content channels. In our Digital Dismemberments spotlights this evening, we will be covering Cult Epic's Blu-ray release of Jorg Buttgereit's Nekromantik, as well as Scream Factory's Blu-ray release of Return of the Living Dead. I think it's a great double feature if you stop and think about it. Nekromantik happens to be one of my favorite movies. It's one of those very polarizing films. You either love it or you hate it. It's a tough watch for some people, but Cult Epics does an amazing job with this release, and that certainly does not throw any shade at Scream Factory's Blu-ray release of Return of the Living Dead, another classic in the eyes of many genre fans. While not quite in my wheelhouse for what I like in zombie films, there was certainly a lot of ground broken with that film. There are many great performances, many great scenes. So we have two films that I feel are really impact films in our genre. We will also be hearing from 3 bands in our Metal Massacre Spotlights this evening. In fact, let's get to our first one. The name of the band is Infant Annihilator. The CD is the Elysian Grand Evil Gallery Arc, and the song is Crucifilth.
Suck
welcome back. You just heard Infant Annihilator. The CD was the Elysian Grand Evil Gallery Arc, and the song was Crucifilth. Infant Annihilator is a British deathcore band formed in 2012, well known for its explicit music videos and obscene song titles. Currently, the band has a demo, 4 singles, of which 3 are covers, and 2 studio albums, one released in 2012 and one released in the summer of 2016. If you want to find out more about this band, find out where they're touring, where to pick up their merchandise and their CDs, head on over to www.facebook.com/Infant Annihilator. But now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for some digital dismemberment. In our first digital dismemberment spotlight this evening, we are covering Jorg Buttgereit's Nekromantik, released by Cult Epics on Blu-ray. Again, the film is directed by Jorg Buttgereit, produced by Manfred O. Jelinski. Special effects were handled by Jorg Buttgereit, M. Rodenkirchen, Bernd Daktari Lorenz, and Franz Rodenkirchen. The cast includes Daktari Lorenz, Beatrice Manowski, Harold Lunt, Colosio Schudensdorf, Henri Boeck, Clement Schwender, Jorg Buttgereit, Holger Sur, Harold Weiss, Heike Serban, Susa Koldadest. And the release date was 10/7 of 2014. To give you the premise, the controversial horror film that shocked the world in 1987 when it was banned in Germany, censored in Japan, and simultaneously became a huge underground hit in the US, now long out of print. Nekromantik tells the story of Rob, who works at a street cleaning agency and visits roadside accidents to clean up the scene. Incidentally, Rob collects the body parts and shares them with his girlfriend Beatrice. When Rob presents a complete corpse taken out of a swamp, their undying love reaches its peak, but soon after, Betty gets a more liking towards the corpse and leaves Rob, which takes him to the sick end of his destruction. Now, there will definitely be spoiler alerts for this, so you are forewarned. With the amount of graphic gore and violence, notwithstanding the tremendously offensive and gross subject matter, Buttgereit's film manages to shock and awe you at the same time. Looking at it strictly from a technical standpoint, the film is certainly something to marvel at. Shot on an extremely low budget and with friends, the film almost has a home movie feel about it. Buttgereit handles the majority of the tasks himself, from the writing, directing, acting, editing, casting, set design, camera work, and special effects. From a societal standpoint, the film touches upon several topics, including the German working class, depression, the desensitization of violence in film and television, sexual dysfunction, and fetish. The odd thing about this film is how you start to empathize with the main character of Rob. Not from the standpoint of agreeing with what he does, but how his upbringing and emotional collapse pull you in. Not being able to have a relationship with anyone living and having his only toy being taken away by the woman that he loves, he basically collapses upon himself in the most masochistic of ways. His losses are so soul-crushing that he becomes one of the dead at his own hands, with the film implying that his corpse is now to become the whim of someone else. Now, the film opens on a couple driving down the road and them becoming involved in an accident that kills both of them. The next day, we see the car at the accident scene, replete with the driver dead behind the wheel and the passenger torn in half outside the car. A street cleaning team shows up, and that is where we meet Rob. His co-workers do not seem to like him, and we can see his job hangs by a thread. The flat that he shares with his girlfriend Betty has jars of pickled body parts that adorn the shelves. Pictures of famous murderers hang from the walls alongside the centerfolds of models. Rob continuously brings home new parts to add to their collection, all to her approval. While Betty bathes in the bathtub of bloody water, Rob watches TV and has odd flashbacks to his childhood, including the skinning of a rabbit and a dreamlike scene of him conducting an autopsy on a corpse. There almost seems to be a dulling apathy in their relationship until Rob brings home a corpse that he finds on the job in a swamp. The corpse belongs to a man that is accidentally killed when a neighbor is careless with an air rifle and shoots him off of a ladder. The man later disposes of the body in the swamp, presumably never to be seen again. He brings the corpse home and presents it to her as a gift. There is a certain gleam in their eyes as they explore the corpse that degenerates into debauchery in its most primal form: sex. You can see the obvious lust in their eyes as they modify the corpse for her use, sawing a piece of pipe for a phallus and placing a condom on it so that she can have sex with it. Rob at first watches and then joins in as everything breaks down into a threesome. The general attitude of the couple seems to improve, and in a scene as ghastly as the menage a trois, they sit down to a meal that may or may not be comprised of a body part in the refrigerator, all while the corpse hangs from the wall and uses various fluids of decomposition into bowls placed all around it. Things appear to be in a state of bliss, but while Rob is still at work, Betty continues to have her way with the corpse, reading love stories and talking to it. Things continue along as she verbally and physically woos the corpse and has sex with it again. Viewing this from an outside perspective lets you see this is an almost adulterous affair behind Rob's back. Granted, he was the one that brought it home for their enjoyment together, but Betty continues the amorous affair behind his back. And when he is fired from his job for keeping dirty uniforms in his locker and being late for work, Betty emasculates him for not standing up for himself and leaves him, taking the corpse with her. Rob begins to break down mentally, even further than he already is. He kills their cat and guts it, rubbing its blood and innards all over himself while in the bathtub. He tries to make the best of his situation and goes to see a movie, but is bullied by another patron and leaves. He goes home and, in desperation, tries to kill himself with booze and pills. He falls asleep instead and has weird dreams of himself as a corpse in a trash bag, followed by a young woman giving him a severed head. They dance and frolic in the park, tossing the head and entrails back and forth amongst themselves in joy. Rob awakens and decides to hire a prostitute. They meet in a cemetery, and while Rob tries his best, he finds that he cannot perform sexually. The prostitute, thinking the entire situation is funny, begins to mock him until he becomes enraged and strangles her to death with his bare hands. He finds himself aroused and begins to have sex with her corpse until he is discovered by a gardener, whom he decapitates with a shovel. Depressed and at the end of his rope, he heads home, and in one of the most extreme moments ever put to film, he commits suicide by stabbing himself in the stomach several times with a large knife while masturbating, dying in ecstasy and horrid pain while fountains of blood and cum flow from his body. The film ends as we see Rob's tombstone and a visitor, a woman's foot clad in high heels and stockings. Now, the bonus features on this disc are quite stunning. Included is the Grindhouse 35mm HD version with an introduction by Buttgereit. The introduction lasts about 1 minute and 35 seconds, and the film in its original runtime of 75 minutes. The film can be watched with or without the introduction, which was done at a screening of the 35mm print at the Beyond Film Fest held at the Egyptian Theater October 24th, 2013. George discusses how the film was shot on Super 8 and how it was transferred to 16mm and then blown up to 35. He goes on to say that this version is how he always wanted the film to look. The movie certainly has more of a grindhouse look and feel to it, and in many ways gives the film more of a haunting look. It's a nice extra feature that allows you to see the film in another way. There's a Q&A with Buttgereit. It's a running time of about 40 minutes. This took place the same night as the screening. He talks about the making of Nekromantik 1 and 2, as well as Shram, another one of his films. The problems he had with the government in Germany for the release of the films, the concept of how the films came together, the lack of dialogue in the film, and the many hats and problems from the technical end that came with making Nekromantik and more. The audience also asked several questions, and he shows a great comedic range while answering. He also covers censorship in Germany quite extensively as well. It's really a fantastic insight to the film and the man who made it. It's top-notch and really worth watching. There's a 13-minute featurette called The Making of Nekromantik. It's a nice look at the behind-the-scenes of how the film was made. There's a wealth of scene stills and video footage of the cast and crew while making the film, as well as a running dialogue interview with Buttgereit, where he goes into great detail about the meaning and the making of the film, including the corpse design, the script, set locations, effects makeup, the actors and actresses. By listening to this, you can certainly tell that this was a passionate project for him, and he treats the subject matter with tremendous respect. There are also a few blooper scenes included as well. Again, a very nice look at the making of the film, and it really helps it to give some context to the project. There's another one just entitled Nekromantik, which is a featurette. This is a German interview with Buttgereit detailing the technical aspects of Nekromantik that utilize scenes from the film and home footage not used in the making of Nekromantik featurette, which I previously discussed. He really goes into detail on the script and the difficulties of finding a cast that can convey what he wanted on the screens. He talked about the problem he had with the screening in Norway and the different cuts of the film on home video depending on what country it is shown in, as well as what some of the cast and crew did after the release of the film. Again, highly informative and captivating. There's a still photo gallery that includes 101 different photos and stills in color and black and white from the film. There's a Hot Love HD with commentary by Buttgereit. It's about 30 minutes. This is a short that can be watched with or without the commentary. It's a short that predates Nekromantik and stars Dr. Lorenz, and it tells the tale of a young man that is in love with a woman who dumps him for a new guy. Crushed, he vows revenge and rapes her, impregnating her with a monster baby that winds up murdering her with an axe. It's a great short that shows Buttgereit's skill even before Nekromantik, and you can even see where the basis of the Nekromantik soundtrack came from with this short. It's bloody, passionate, and unrelenting. Again, well worth watching and discussing. Filmmakers looking to break into the industry can learn plenty from watching this and seeing how emotional content can be shown without lots of dialogue and almost no budget. There's a featurette on Hot Love. It's about 3.5 minutes. It's a black and white look back at the screening of Hot Love in Germany with comments from the crowd and musical numbers by Dr. Lorenz. It's primarily in German, and again, it's a nice look back at the early start of Buttgereit's career. There are several trailers from some of his other films, including Nekromantik in HD. It's a 2-minute trailer. Nekromantik 2, which is about 1 minute and 5 seconds. Der Todesking, which is 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Schramm, which is 1 minute 30. And Hot Love, 1 minute 12 seconds. The original motion picture soundtrack is also included in this, and there is a limited edition Nekromantik artwork print by Johnny Ryan. There is also a limited edition Nekromantik photo of Beatrice M. The format is NTSC. The film is in color. It is not rated. It is a 1080p high-definition widescreen 1331, and it is in German with subtitles. Now, Cult Epics has done an amazing job releasing what is widely considered one of the most controversial films of all time. There have been several fantastic D-releases for Nekromantik 1. In particular, the Barrel Entertainment Edition, both in a 1 and 2 disc version, and the Arrow Films 3-disc limited edition Blu-ray that includes other short films, the soundtrack, and collector book. But the pinnacle right now are the Blu-ray releases from Cult Epics. The addition of 2 versions of the film, the new Director's Approval HD transfer from the original Super 8mm negative, and the Grindhouse HD version from the theatrical 35mm print, is phenomenal all on its own. And the introduction from Buttgereit, the Q&A with the director at the American Cinematheque, the making of Nekromantik, the Nekromantik featurette, still photo galleries, trailers from Buttgereit's other films, the never-before-released short film Hot Love in HD, along with the commentary and featurette, as well as the soundtrack from Nekromantik, make this a must-own. The limited edition prints from the film are a nice touch as well. Everything about this is must-have, and looking forward to more releases from Cult Epic soon. I give this movie a 5 out of 5. I give the Blu-ray a 10 out of 10. It does not come much better than this. Again, I strongly advise you, though, that this is extreme content. This is not a horror film for everyone. But if you are really looking for something outside of the boundaries, something that will make you think and something that will make you cringe, make sure to head on over to Cult Epics and get your copy of the Blu-ray release of Nekromantik. In just a few moments, we are going to go into our feature interview with fellow Morbidly Beautiful journalist and HorrorTuber Vicky Cirello, filmmaker Ian Messenger, and HorrorTuber Lamont Smith, a.k.a. Horror Miser Monty G. But before that, we're going to go into our second Metal Massacre Spotlight this evening. The name of the band is Crest of Darkness, the CD is Welcome the Dead, and the song is Welcome the Dead. welcome back. You just heard Crest of Darkness. The CD was Welcome the Dead, and the song was Welcome the Dead. A little bit of info on this band. Lead singer Ingar's brainchild, Crest of Darkness, was conceived in the mid-90s when his former band Conception was still at its peak. As opposed to Conception, the idea behind Crest of Darkness was unquestionable, a product of Ingar's passion for sheer sonic brutality and devotion to the satanic ideology, according to Anton LaVey's Church of Satan and a Satanic Bible. The contents of Crest of Darkness's lyrics clearly reflects Ingar's beliefs as well as his deep admiration for vampirism. To find out more about this band, where they're touring, and to pick up their merchandise, head on over to www.crestofdarkness.com. But now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our feature interview.
And you will face the sea of darkness, and all therein that may be explored.
And welcome to our feature interview this evening. Tonight, we're going to be tackling a subject that seems to be a sore spot for a particular group of horror content generators, in particular with what's going on YouTube and how they have changed their algorithm that allows people to get monetary gain from their products. Tonight as guests, we are going to have Vicky Cirello. Vicky is a horror reviewer at Morbidly Beautiful. She's a horror tuber on YouTube and is the manager of Nightmare Maven. Vicky, say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm really happy to be able to talk about this topic with you guys today.
Oh, it's great. I'm glad to have you on. We're also being joined by Ian Messenger. He's a filmmaker that has several of his projects on YouTube. You may know Ian from his shorts Friday the 13th Revenant and Friday the 13th Legacy. Ian, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's not a problem at all. I really enjoyed your work, and I feel like you can really help bring a filmmaker's perspective to this argument. So,
thank you.
And last but not least, we have Lamont Smith, a.k.a. Horror Miser Monty G, who is a horror tuber. Monty, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great. I want to thank you for inviting me. I want to thank the panel, especially Vicky, because we're pretty good friends. I want to thank her for telling you about me and inviting me to the show.
Well, definitely. You know, I'm always looking to expand my viewing group. I'm always interested in looking at other people's opinions. And I felt like the three of you, after doing some research, were the perfect people for this. Now, just so people, you know, most people know, of course, if you're listening to the podcast, I write for Morbidly Beautiful. I do the podcast for Morbidly Beautiful. And as I was scrolling through our Facebook feed, I happened to come across this article that Vicky wrote. And Vicky had gone on about how people that are doing stuff on YouTube, particularly people in the horror industry, received an email about how their pages were being demonetized. Vicky, can you kind of tell us how this came to your attention and why it was such a hot button issue for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, first before I even became a writer on Morbidly Beautiful, I was on YouTube. So that's how I found out about it. And it first started with demonetization. So YouTube's algorithm was going in and finding content that it deemed not suitable for all advertisers. And because of the nature of the content that we make, horror, reviewing horror movies, talking about horror, anything, that kind of gets lumped in with other actual harmful videos. And there's really no regulation yet on how to weed out the actual harmful material. And then the email that you mentioned, this actually came after I wrote my article about the new rule to become a partner through YouTube's partner program, which allows for monetization to even happen on the site. So now there are new regulations set in place, so some of the smaller horror channels are going to be affected. They won't even be able to have the option to monetize their videos.
Now, Monty, for you, you did a video about this just the other day, and as someone who has a following, has so many hours of people listening to them, can you kind of clarify a bit what was in that email and how it affects what you do?
Well, as I said in my video, when I saw the video and I saw the email and I was reading it, I'm like, well, damn, where the hell did this come from? And then it's like, for me, it's like, that's kind of disappointing because as a small YouTuber, when I first got 100, because the threshold was you had to have 10,000 views, you had to have 100 subscribers. And when I hit that threshold, I was excited. I was very happy. I actually accomplished something that I actually accomplished it very quickly. And then to see that, it was disappointing. It was demoralizing. It was like, well, damn, what else needs to happen to us? It seems like it always affects us, whether it's horror channels or even other channels that are not horror related. But, I thought that was disrespect for smaller channels, and especially after whatever it's called, Paul, whatever the hell his name is, these guys' name is, have the subject to pull.
Right, yeah, I saw that where he actually filmed a dead body, put it up on YouTube, and YouTube let the video continue to run, correct?
Yeah, and first of all, it's like I have to say this, I don't know what made him think that that was appropriate to go to a place where people unfortunately take their own lives. I mean, it's bad enough that families of those people have to live in that tragedy, and they have to even think about wanting to go there and struggle with on his part.
I mean, it's definitely hard to argue that point. Now, Ian, for you, you are a filmmaker. I mentioned the 2 Friday the 13th shorts. You have a few more things up on your productions page. Kind of talk about how something like this affects you as a filmmaker.
This happened, it started happening, I think, before most people realize. I think maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, YouTube would email some of the, I don't know if it's bigger, I'm not a huge channel, I think we have 1,000 subscribers. At one point, I remember the videos we had over views on the channel, and we were doing pretty well, but about a year and a half ago, there was these emails, and it's like, oh, this content or they send you these things, and they don't this is copyright. See how it's copyright, and it wasn't. There's never going to be copyright. You'd write like, well, it's copyright. But copyright. So they would actually force you to take these films down or these videos down before they found this really cool way of just making their algorithm. Sometimes it's hard, and kind of divert tracks. I think Metal Legacy has 3,400 views on YouTube, but if you go to the Facebook page where we just did the direct upload, it's almost 70,000 times.
Wow.
So the second they put this in, this motion, it basically killed Monk Channel. Like comparatively, you look at those tremendous and go, oh, YouTube's no longer good. It's just no longer good for business. It's bad for business. And I think, YouTube was a little hotbed initially for filmmakers and storytellers because the way that show the world what we do, and they kind of embrace it.
Right. Now, the interesting thing is you bring up using YouTube as a format. Doesn't doesn't Facebook use an algorithm that kind of selects where your stuff goes anyway?
So when you go to the Facebook user, when you have a business page, it will give you the option to direct who you are, like your brand, and you go into like your demographic. So you control your algorithm, right? You are what who sees your stuff. At that point, you don't really get things too much. Now, I'm sure a guy like Logan Paul putting up a video, if he was directly uploaded to Facebook with a real dead body in it, yeah, they probably still tag into that because it's kind of unavoidable. You know, Facebook so far, as long as you don't have copyright used again, they won't do anything.
Huh.
So far.
Now, Vicky... Oh, no, please, go ahead.
No, it could change real quick. Because that's the problem with social media right now, is that their rules change because it is one person that is at the top of the mountain. They go, well, I don't know. And the legal team goes, well, people think about this right now, so we can't do this. So it's literally about that. You wake up tomorrow and you decided to make people from Facebook because of the report.
Now, Vicky, for you, what do you think about this? I mean, is this just a more roundabout way of censorship? Because that's the way it kind of comes across to me. You bring up, everyone's bringing up the Logan Paul thing, and it's a valid point. Here's a guy that showed an actual dead body on YouTube, and if I remember the stats correctly, didn't it get between 400 and 700,000 hits before he decided to remove it?
Right. YouTube did not actually take the video down. He didn't monetize it. He was operating under the belief that he was bringing awareness to mental illness and suicide prevention and things like that. However misguided that was. He didn't monetize it, but that didn't stop it from getting to number 6 on YouTube's trending page before he took it down, not YouTube. So there's no telling at this point how long that video would have stayed up there had he not taken it down.
And I find it interesting because, when you look through YouTube, I use it as a research tool, of course, for the podcast, for articles and things like that. And I think it's funny that I can find segments and portions of the Faces of Death videos. Those are still up. And now, while granted, some of the footage is real and some of the footage is fake, we are talking about extreme footage, For you guys, how do you feel about that? One of the things that I know that Monty brought up specifically in his video was the fact that YouTube doesn't have a way of deciphering between what's real and what's imaginary. And I think Monty's argument about, it sees that, you have a picture of Freddy with blood on his glove is enough to get you flagged, but, seeing a monkey get the top of his head lopped off in Faces of Death can be found on the page right now.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems that the algorithm has. I'm pretty sure most people know Freddy's my favorite horror icon.
Sure.
Freddy, pop up on my page, everything like that. So I say if all of a sudden I want to do a picture of Freddy with his blood splashing, blood splatter on his face, because the algorithm can't tell the difference between fake and what's real, and then I'll get paid for it. And that's the problem. Unfortunately, yeah, you do see the Faces of Death up on there. Now, I don't know if it's because they think it's a movie, and that's the reason why it doesn't get big that way, or maybe it's because it's part of, like I said, maybe it's part of other YouTube big boys, so, they're not going to do that to one of the big people. So that's why that doesn't get big.
Now, Ian, did you ever receive any kind of message about the blood or the gore in your shorts?
So not directly about one of mine, but they would send me that would say, if we see, if basically you tag a video with, this is where it's best. If you tag a video with scary or horror or gore or anything like that, it immediately loses like half the traffic it's originally going to get. They basically put it in the basement of YouTube. They were pretty forthcoming about that. I didn't actually know about the think that channel lost all of its monetization on one of their videos. So it was kind of a bummer.
Wow. Now, Vicky, for you, well, for all of us, really, I mean, it seems like podcasting and video casting are the wave of our genre, People today are more into seeing videos than they are reading an article or anything like that. Do you feel like what YouTube is doing is detrimental not only to us as journalists and filmmakers, but do you think in the long run this is something that can come back to bite YouTube? Do you see a mass exodus from content creators?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I'm actually sorry about one of the guys on my crew, and I said, the way YouTube's going and the way they're handling this, I would maybe I'm a little negative on the situation, but I think, I think it's going to go the way it's going to go. YouTube's going to start losing content creators, and somebody's going to realize it's happening, and they're going to create the next YouTube, and they're going to create the rules, and that's where all the content creators are going to go. So I think we're going to see a big drop off on YouTube. And that's my problem, because YouTube has no competition. There was Disney, when I heard Disney has gone down, if I'm not mistaken, and from what I heard from other people talk about it, it wasn't getting the top of views in the beginning. And I think YouTube knows that they have no competition, but I believe if once they do have competition, and then, people will leave, and YouTube will start to skip.
What about you, Vicky?
I mean, I think it's on its way to something else. You see it pushing YouTube Red and YouTube TV all the time, and I think what they're trying to do is try to become one of the forerunners in replacing cable TV, but without the cable. So I think it's going to lose content creators in that way, because there's just so many of us that wouldn't fit that mold. Like, you wouldn't see horror movie reviews on cable television. That's not what YouTube wants. So I think, hopefully, I would hope that somebody is going to finally realize this and create something that's a little more manageable and a little more beneficial to the actual creators. Trust me, if I had that sort of knowledge, I would have done it already. But hopefully somebody out there sees the decline. I think YouTube is going to do the declining for itself. I think it's going to change itself into something different, and that's what's going to happen.
Now, we talk about other formats. Of course, we mentioned showing videos and stuff on Facebook. What do you guys think about Vimeo as a valid content provider?
I think for Vimeo, at least, it's a valid platform for video creation. I think it's kind of become what most people know as, like, for more serious filmmakers, I guess, and that's not really how I want to say it. I just can't think of any other way to phrase it. But at least any screeners I've ever gotten to watch for a review or anything have always been on Vimeo, and I feel like it's more for short film and things like that. But I mean, there's no telling that it couldn't become the next place for us. There's also another one called VidMe that a lot of people have been kind of edging towards, because there is a way you can actually directly pay the content creator for their content. You can pledge money to them or donate money to them, as opposed to getting AdSense money. So I don't know if that'll take off either.
Now, we look at, the content creation, the availability to do it, and it seems kind of in a sense that YouTube and Facebook are hand in hand, because you can put a link from YouTube on the Facebook and it'll put a preview up and put it on. But when you try to do that with Vimeo, it doesn't put a preview up, unless I'm doing it wrong. I don't know. But, what do you feel like, why can't YouTube make it to where these ads, these people that want to put their ads on YouTube, why don't they make it to where they can select the type of content they want their ads to go to? Why can't they just say, hey, you know, I don't want my video, you know, for anything, you know, that's bloody or gory or horror themed? Because it would seem like they would make more money if they would allow the advertisers to target their audiences.
I mean, and that's the golden question. I feel like so many people have brought up that solution and so many other solutions to YouTube's problem. I mean, I don't know how many times I've seen horror movie trailers at the front of my own videos and other horror creators' videos, and I don't understand why I would have to be demonetized, because I would think that they would want to run their horror movie trailer on my video. So that, like you said, makes perfect sense, and I don't really know why they can't do that. I don't know what it would take to implement that, but it seems like it would be the perfect solution to the problem.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised when I actually saw trailer for Insidious Chapter 4, Last Key, on my review for that movie. I'm like, wow, this is actually funny. And here it is. I see a trailer for Insidious, the Last Key, and then next thing you know, here comes my video. Now, of course, you know, I got demonetized for, you know, for that anyway, but I still see the ad pop up.
Right. I mean, it's funny that happens. You know, Ian, for you, again, as a filmmaker, you know, this directly impacts you in a lot of ways, because YouTube is kind of the best way for newer filmmakers to get their name out there, to show people what it is that they can do. You know, does this make you change the way that you market and tag your films when you put them on YouTube?
Well, it actually did. It changed it completely. Outside of Legacy and Revenant, I haven't put anything on YouTube in quite a long time. We just fully decided to switch over to doing the convention route and doing feature films, and that's how we market ourselves now. We're scheduled for Man Monster in North Carolina in February. And
Nice.
I think all of us are going to be there. We're going to be hanging out in movies, and even Legacy. Now the Legacy is going to be there. Monkey Farm is going to be there. Cars Like Hell is going to be there. T-shirts, all this stuff. Basically, you have to film a road show as a filmmaker at this point. Adam Green, let's do this with Victor Crowley. He took the movie, he played it in all the eligible draft houses that would allow it. And I guess like some theaters wouldn't allow him to play because they didn't like the gore. They thought it was too much. But as an independent filmmaker, social media outside of Facebook and going, hey, I'm going to be here, doesn't really work to fully keep yourself out there. You literally now have to keep yourself out there. If you don't have the means to do that, at this point, it's just free rent.
You know, you look at all the things that we see on the news. You know, we see bombings, we see mass murder, we see, you know, shootings. We see all of these horrific things that go on. And no one bats an eye at this real life violence. You know, it's like, oh, we accept it. You know, and I come from a generation, you know, I'll be 42 here in a couple weeks. You know, I remember as a kid that if you didn't like what was on TV, you changed the channel. If you didn't like what was playing on the radio, you changed the station. If you didn't like an author, you didn't read his books. You know, and now everything has become, well, we don't like this, so we're going to protest it. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. You know, do you think that plays a part in why advertisers are crying, quote unquote, foul about their trailers and their product placement being in front of certain things? Because, you know, you look at some of the commercials you see on YouTube, you know, you see things for like Tide laundry soap and stuff like that. Well, you know, they're not complaining when they're on a police drama where 6 people just got shot on TV.
Yeah.
That's true.
Please, whoever. Go ahead. Vicky, go ahead. Go ahead and run with that.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I feel like when it comes to anything on the internet, on YouTube, on social media, there's still this disconnect. And I don't for me anyway, at least for my generation, I feel like it's blended so much together, like that I don't get that separation. To me, it's all the same. There's all advertisements everywhere. There's real life violence. I can see it on the internet. I can see it on TV. I feel like for maybe the older generations, there is kind of a disconnect. So everything feels like it's okay if it's on TV. It's okay if we're running Tide Pod commercials in between stories of kids that are eating the Tide Pods and going to the hospital, but it's not okay on YouTube if we're running a horror movie ad on a horror movie video.
Just absolutely idiocy. Ian, what are your thoughts on that?
Basically, what it comes down to is that something happened and people became very sensitive. Marketers want to market to only middle America. They want to market to the white picket fences, the blue-collar worker, the nuclear family. That's what they want to market to. Everything else then here's them. And a part of that is the kid wearing his Cannibal Corpse t-shirt at the horror movie convention wearing a chain around his neck because they think that's like Gene Simmons. He's been standing in line for 45 minutes for an autograph. They don't want to market it. They don't care about it. That's the thing. It's big business. It's not realizing imaginary. It's big business. Just forgetting about who makes big business. It's not just in America. It's the freaks, the geeks. And by doing this, by blowing this apart like this, they're going to be separating us. And a lot of people, I don't know, man. I'm getting all heated about it.
No, it's okay. I mean, we should be angry about this. I mean, I want you guys to get this out there.
They decided to probably learn a suit somewhere, and they go, I'm too sensitive. This bothers me, or this bothers my wife, or bothers my daughter, so I don't want it. So get rid of it. So by doing this, that's what they're doing. They're trying to get rid of the monsters. They're trying to take the monsters, scare them when they were kids, put them back under the bed, and say that nobody wants to see you. And by marketing their advertising this way, and when I received emails, I was told that your advertiser could choose you. That's what I was told. I was always told that a horror movie would market themselves on you. And all of a sudden, nobody was marketing my stuff anymore. And every once in a while, a car commercial was like one of my movies. And that's about what I got. Basically, that's what I feel on this. I feel people just got too sensitive. It's not, it's not imaginary and real. It's just people don't like monsters, so they want to hide them. That's it.
Monty?
I agree with that. I'm probably one of the oldest people on here because I'll be 55 in August. So I've seen the trend change in the Christmas. Probably, I think it changed probably with the Janet fiasco at Super Bowl. That started to change there.
I mean, that's very true, though. That's a valid point.
Yeah, it started to change there, and now especially in today's climate after what happened, I won't get into political stuff, but I'm pretty sure everyone knows what I'm talking about. Now, it's just like, all of a sudden, everyone's true face is now coming out. It's okay to act this way now. And I think that's plays into the fact of what's happening right now. It's like, oh no, we don't want to see Freddie or Jason anymore. No, we don't want to see all this crap anymore. We don't want to see that anymore.
It's kind of funny you say that, though, because you look at one of the most successful horror films of 2017. It was it.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Shattered box office records. Every time we hear that argument that horror is dead, it's no longer accepted by society, we have a film that comes out that shakes it to its foundation.
It's funny because before I started my channel, and most months and other, now I got the name Monty G, and I used to go clubbing this late before I got married, and my boys called me Monty G, and they were all looking at me weird. Monty G, why do you like horror movies, man? That's your sticker. He looked at me like I was weird. Or I would read about, serial killers, because I know that's fascinating to me. I mean, I love watching Investigation Discovery Channel. And now, because I got this horror club and wonderful people like Vicky and other people in the horror community on YouTube. And so now it's like, hey, look, it's like, wow, all these other people are just like me. And that's what I thought it was like one of the few.
Well, one of the things I think that's interesting, and it was something that Ian said was, you talk about the advertisers don't care about us, the people that go to the horror conventions, the people that watch these movies. What they don't realize is when you talk about quote-unquote geek culture, especially when it comes to horror, we're one of the brackets that have some of the most disposable income to spend.
I agree with that. Yeah, that's true.
So,
and we're some of the most passionate people in the world. Once we get behind something,
exactly,
we'll ride it out till the end.
You think, that's the weird part to me is for them to sit there and think, for an advertiser to go, oh, we don't want our stuff on horror themed stuff, but we buy cars, we buy washing detergent, we buy all these same things that they don't want to advertise.
Yep, we shop, we clean. And look, my wife, the money I make, my wife buys stuff with it. So, hey, look, you're missing a niche market if you don't get this, the horror genre. I mean, that's why I don't understand why they want to hide it. I think maybe because, a prime example is Silent Night, Deadly Night, the first film when it came out.
Oh, yes.
And all these mothers taking it to show. So keep in mind, first of all, this is because they thought the kids were going to go crazy because they feared Canada killing somebody from that. So keep in mind, first of all, Silent Night, Deadly Night was rated R. First of all, it was not made for kids to go see. It was a horror movie. So I don't know what these mothers were doing, but unfortunately, it killed the movie. The movie theater took it out 2 weeks because they couldn't, advertisers started pulling the rest of the film. Not because a few mothers thought their kids were going to see a scary Santa Claus, but that movie wasn't even marketed towards them at all.
I mean, that's a valid point. And, it brings up the other question, just like theaters, you have a movie rating system. Music, you have, the explicit content warnings and things like this. Is this a point of the internet and in particular YouTube just being lazy? Why can't content be marked at a certain rating, and if you're under a certain age, you can't follow the link?
It can, and people create their profile on YouTube, and it has, let's slide it back in, like 10 years ago, I think at this point, it asks you for your date of birth. And the second people lie about their date of birth, a video that is more mature, no worry. But if you don't have a profile for YouTube, it allows you, what's your date of birth? And then you can lie about your date of birth, and then you just go right to the video. And that's the problem.
Okay, but is it? Let's use a valid argument with this. I used to manage a Musicland Sam Goody, and I remember when the first Eminem album came out, and our company had a strict policy that if a person was under the age of 16 and was not in there with a parent, you were not allowed to sell them a CD marked with explicit material. In a movie theater, you're not supposed to be able to buy a ticket or sell a ticket to someone who is under a certain age for a certain film. And I feel like if the kids sneak in and they, and then the parents find out and complain, well, isn't that on the parents for the children lying? Why hold the content creator, seriously, why hold the content creator responsible for your kid lying? Why isn't it on the parents?
Just like Kyle's mom. South Park, they're going to blame anybody else except themselves. blame Canada, blame Terrence Attila, blame anybody else. It can't be their fault.
It's not my fault. It's just like some of these kids that I see out there today, or in the city, when they do something bad. My kid doesn't do that. My kid is great. Look, kid is bad. He's a brat. Don't discipline him, and that's the problem. The parents don't take responsibility for their own self. Now, of course, I came up in an era where, everyone respects your parents, respecting your neighbor's parents. Otherwise, especially my mother made me a fucking back.
You get that ass beat. Hell yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
was too. No, the parents don't. I hate to bring up his name again because he's such a dipshit, but that Logan Paul.
You know, I'm going to find this guy and I'm going to send the podcast to him.
Oh, trust me. I need to read about this guy. Some shit that he did. Like, I still can't believe he actually thought that was making musical film in a suicide place.
But the whole point is, most of it, I mean, part of the problem is a lot of his audience is young kids, and I remember, I don't remember what video it is I was watching, but they were talking to the parents that were with their kids to, like, go see a Logan Paul event or something, and most of them don't even know who Logan Paul is or what he does. So the whole point is they don't even know what their kids are watching.
Oh boy, that's bad. That's bad. You know, if I live in an era, I grew up in the 70s. If I grew up in an era where we had social media like this, there's no way in what my mom would let me allowed to watch something like that, not without her knowing about it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's kind of why, you know, I feel like, you know, the onus is not so much on the content creators, it's on these parents. You know, it's, you know, today the TV is a babysitter. You know, the computer is a babysitter to placate the kid. And, you know, it's like I said, it's funny. No one complains about, you know, and it's a good show because I watch the show, you know, like no one complains about the sexual content that you see on Law and Order SVU, you know, and that's the thing is that's real life shit.
Yeah, because some of the stuff they do, they actually pull it from the headline, and I think that's one of the reasons why Law and Order, even SVU itself, but they do warn you when the content looks mature.
It's just amazing to me.
There's a kid YouTube I believe girl, and she's got a little tablet, and she'll watch her shows. Sometimes down next to me. And a couple Saturdays ago, we're sitting there, and she's watching one of her shows, and it was playing the song over it. And I sat there and I listened to the song. She's coming along to it. And the song is legitimately about killing herself. Like it's about staring down the barrel of a gun and then getting to the gate for the gun. And the images are Disney princesses, but they're kind of powered up. And I think I've seen this one way from her. 6 months away from her, I went through and I blocked that video, blocked similar videos, and cleared her history. Because parents have to do that. You have to be aware of what your kid's watching at all times. It's a Saturday morning, and you know she's a little girl, she wants to Disney princesses. There's no way I thought she was going to get to this point. She did. Immediately, parents, I responded. And maybe it's because I'm a little more in touch with it, because I make horror movies, so I know there's bad shit all over the internet. So I hear that, I take better attention, but you have to be able to catch them. But that's the problem is, everybody's too busy with their pumpkin spice latte and focusing on their iPhone X. And they're like, I don't have time for this kid that I could do. So just do whatever you want. Oh, fuck, that's bad. There's one everywhere. What do you watch? It's bad.
No, but I mean, I'm glad.
You brought that up, though.
Well, no, it's good. It's good to hear another parent say that because, you know, I'm pretty liberal about what I mean, I have a 16-year-old daughter. She'll be 17 here in 2 months. And when she was little, you know, I do makeup and effects for films, and she was 4. She was a zombie in one of my films. And, you know, people can argue the semantics of whether what I did was good or not. But like at an early age, I introduced my daughter to horror films. And my reasoning behind that was if Daddy works on these things and she knows that Daddy works on these things, it was important for me to teach her at an early age how to distinguish that what goes on in real life is not necessarily what you see on the movie screen. And I think in a lot of ways, I think it was good for my daughter because she learned young that what you see in movies is not necessarily reality. You know, we can argue the whole semantics of whether or not parents are doing their job, whether it's the job of YouTube or whatever station you're watching to police what it is that's on. But what do you guys think is the next logical step? You know, is it going to just take a mass exodus? Is it going to take a new version of YouTube? What is it that's going to have to bring credibility to the art form that we love so that people leave it the hell alone?
I think that your best option is a new version of YouTube. YouTube is too big, it's too powerful right now. It's a multi-million-dollar company, and they're not going to change their way. Because people, I think all four of us have YouTube down their account. And if once you do that, you immediately got it. And it's too big powerful, so there has to be something specifically for creators, not some kid that's got a camera and says, watch me hit my phone face at the ball now. I'll try to create it that is. So for creators, you know, you know what that is? So the two assholes that have done those bunch of videos that do some stupid shit. That's what that is. You know, hey, it's like, hey, we got done those bunch of videos. Let's not go to college and actually get an education. Let's do some stupid shit and put it on camera. That's what that is. You know, it's not a very good Buttgereit back in the day. Might get another shot. And you might get another shot through Shudder, which is the streaming service, like horror Netflix.
Yeah.
Something like that is what creators need. And that's not just horror creators, it's creators all around. Every creator, like specific genre, should have their own version of that. There should be a Shudder where we can upload our stuff to, whether it's for reviews or movies or horror music or whatever, and then the guys that make action films or the people that make animation. They all deserve something like that because I think YouTube is just too big and too full of everything. So instead of taking their time and paying attention, they just put a blanket over it. They go, well, I think all of this is bad, so I covered it with a giant blanket. It's just so something specific to creators needs to come out with more creators. Yeah, because they definitely need a competitor, and right now they don't have a competitor, so that's the reason why they can get away with the stuff that they get away with.
Vicky?
100%. I will say a little bit to YouTube's credit. I'm glad Ian brought up those quote children videos unquote with using the Disney characters in very horrifying situations and scenarios. This latest YouTube change to the partner program was implemented in part to stop some of that. So that way they can't monetize the videos and make money off of it, and therefore they won't be suggested to people. So they are trying. I think they're a little bit misguided. They're trying. They are trying, but I completely agree with both Monty and Ian in saying that they're just too big. There's nothing else like it. There's no checks or balances to YouTube. They're just all on their own.
Now, there's an interesting aspect to this, and you know, this could be opening a can of worms, but I think it's at least an avenue worth exploring. In a sense, I realize that YouTube has basically the right, I guess, to say what can and can't be put up on its station or on its website. But on the same token, how close are we coming to that being censorship? And do you think that there would ever be a chance that someone could sue YouTube over this and win?
Yeah, that's a possibility. Yeah, go ahead. Censorship is fine. You know, we see it all the time, R rating, that's a form of censorship, the explicit label. But step into something that is then owned by a big company like Warner Brothers, and somebody's blood, sweat, and tears, they put all their own money into it, they created it as an artist, and they're displaying it kind of like a museum for art. When a person walks in, they cover with blanket, and they go, oh, you can't look at that. Well, I didn't think that could happen, and I created this, and my money went to this. So by all, like, let's say, Friday 13th, 2060, I had a high budget for a short film, budget is X amount of dollars. Well, if they would take that video down, that's my loss of that money. Nobody ever sees the video. I shouldn't have made it in the first place. I guess somebody else decided. Except for viewers to say that movie can't go up. Movies like that can't go up because everything's pretty tame in my, like the way I look at it. Everything's pretty tame. But I've seen gamer reviews get pulled, and you put your like put time and you've taken out the work to make it. So at that point, it becomes a hardship on you because you have now lost money and have nothing to show for it. At that point, I'm pretty sure you can sue somebody. And if it happens to something big enough, like they was TJ Wong, he did Bedfellows short film, and Bedfellows became huge. If they were to pull that video down, I'm pretty sure Drew, the guy like sue them, because that was in the millions of views. He was lost so much money off of that, he probably could have sued them. So, you know, I think we're pretty close there. I think we're close to take some sort of legal action. Yeah, I can definitely see that coming. It wouldn't surprise me if it would happen sooner rather than later. Because somebody's going to say, enough is enough, I can't take this shit anymore. How can they do this to me? It's like, that's it, I'm done, I'm going to sue their ass. And then that's what the whole ball of wax is going to come out. Yep.
Vicky?
I agree to an extent. Unfortunately, when we join YouTube, especially when you join the partner program, but when you agree to upload your videos on YouTube anyway, there are guidelines which are incredibly vague, but there are guidelines which we're supposed to adhere to, but there is also problems I've heard of YouTube taking people's channels down with no reason, taking videos down with no reason, and I think, for me, that's where somebody suing YouTube is going to come in, just from, instead of just throwing the blanket on it and saying, well, advertisers can't go on it, just taking it down. I think that's where we're going to get into the territory where YouTube is going to be sued.
Well,
and that's the sad part, too, because this all starts with the apocalypse. We had those really bad racist videos come up on there, and that's what started the apocalypse with YouTube. That's what all started with them. You know, and we all understand that, yeah, we know that he agreed to, you know, put up content that will offend a lot of people. Fortunately, when you have just one bad apple, you know, ruin the whole bunch.
Well, you know, and that's what, you know, with what Vicky just said, I think that brings up a valid point. You know, channels being taken down, people, you know, pulling down certain content and things like that. I guess what I'm asking, you know, when I asked, do you think someone could win? Because you could certainly go on YouTube, like we'll use Ian's films as an example. I've seen much bloodier fan films on YouTube that stay up, have hundreds of thousands of hits, never see a complaint about it. You know, because, you know, like Vicky said, there are guidelines, they are vague. But say, you know, Ian, your channel was pulled down. There are literally thousands of videos that you could go to on YouTube and point out in court and go, this is more graphic than my video. This is bloodier than my video. You know, again, from a legal standpoint, how could YouTube defend themselves against something like that?
And they can't. And the guidelines are very not straightforward. But there are three. It's very straightforward. It says no nudity, unless it is art. No excessive violence, no real violence, I guess no gore as well as for that. So real gore. It says no real bloodshed to be shown, more or less.
Right.
As long as you adhere by all of those, there's nothing to do. That's the thing. As long as you follow the rules that are straight up, don't do this, then maybe not do this. That's fine. Maybe not do this. Maybe you can get away with that. But as long as there's no nudity, no real life violence, I don't see the bad way to stand on. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I think somebody can run.
Well, and that's an interesting point. You know, like what if, this is the theory, because all four of us put stuff up on YouTube. What if at the beginning of everything that we put up a disclaimer that said, this is art. This is not real gore. This is not real blood. Could at that point they pull our content? And if so, would that be grounds for one of us to be able to go after one of them because we specifically went by
their guideline.
I think, like I said before, I think eventually someone's going to say that's enough, and they will do it. They will be successful. You know, the YouTube will not have to make together because of their vague guidelines.
Yeah. Doing a little precursor like that on the media video, pure fiction dive, this is technically would be an R-rated film somewhere else or an R-rated review or whatever. I think at that point, there's a good chance you become bulletproof. Because you give the second third click the video, it pops up and it stands there for 5 seconds. That's 5 seconds to go. I think it's back up. So if that person watched that video and then decides at the very end, I don't like it, I'm trying to say, get reported because YouTube narrows your video down, that person made a conscious decision to watch the rest of the video with fair warning and YouTube pulled it out. You gave everybody the chance, you told them this is what it is. I think there is room for improvement on our end by doing things like that, by putting up precursors. Because, hey, this is bloody art. And if YouTube takes it down, it looks bad on them. I think in a situation like that, you become bulletproof in the courtroom.
Vicky?
I think that comes full circle to what you mentioned with why don't we, like, age restrict the videos and give ratings like we do in the movies. I know YouTube does have an age gating system. I personally haven't used it, so I can't speak on it that much. But just because when I'm hearing you talk about put a disclaimer at the beginning of your video, that sounds great. And if YouTube were to take down a video, that would be your armor essentially in a court of law. But part of me just thinks like, well, why do I have to do that on my video? Like, shouldn't you be able to watch a horror movie review and understand it says movie review in the title? Like, it just because it says Leatherface in the title too, it's parentheses right next to it. It says movie review.
Right. I mean, it's kind of sad how common sense has gone out the window. I mean, I definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah, I was about to say, you'd be surprised how many people lack common sense today.
Oh, no, I'm not surprised. I mean, I'm a journalist. I see idiocy every day. I hate to say that, and I know Vicky would back me up on that 100%.
Yes, sir. I've been doing Texas. I've been doing Texas work for over 20 years. Trust me.
Oh, there you go.
Common sense out the window.
Well, you know, we're coming up towards the end here, so just a few more quick things. But, you know, of course, we talked about, you know, YouTube needs competition. You know, maybe another site needs to open. You know, the idea of doing different themed Shudder style channels would be a good idea. You know, but if each one of you had a message to give to the listeners, to give to people in general about this topic, what is it that you would say to them, and why it's important that we put up a fight about this subject? And Ian, let's start with you on that.
It's art, you know, I don't want to compare this, but it's when Nazi Germany burns books, because they don't want you to read a certain style of book, because it goes against what they say, so they burn it. It's almost the exact same. They don't want you to watch a certain style of video, so they're banning it, they're getting rid of it, they're taking away the views, because their algorithm puts them in YouTube based on it. It's hard for an artist to be an artist. If there's no art in this world, there's no life in this world. That's my message. So if you let them do this, you're letting them put artists back in the basement, and it's just a dry world after that. So don't let them do that. Don't let them hide art just because it offends one guy or it offends this girl. That doesn't matter. As long as you like it, you like that art, make sure people know. Don't let them do this to things you like. Don't still have you. Don't go to YouTube all the time. Go to Shudder. Go to it's like CryptBox or something on PlayStation Network. There's a whole bunch of other places to get stuff from. YouTube's killing artists by doing killing art. Don't let them do that.
Vicky?
100% agree with what Ian said, and I would like to add, at least for the time being, my message would be I want everyone to stay positive about what's happening about what's happening with YouTube. I know it's very easy to get heated. We all got pretty heated. It's easy to get upset. But just keep with it. Keep keep with it for now. Hopefully something will come along. And support content creators, support artists, even if it is on YouTube for right now, but support them in any way you can. If they're posting on another medium, on Facebook, whatever, support them, comment, share it. If you can, support them on Patreon. That means the world to all of us. And no change can happen unless you speak up. So keep talking about it. Keep criticizing the wrong. Keep criticizing YouTube. They deserve it. And nothing will happen if we don't speak up about it.
Oh, that's the absolute truth. Monty.
Yeah, I agree with Vicky because one of the reasons why I did my video, my rant video. And just like I said on my rant video, and I told other small YouTubers, I said, don't get discouraged. Stay positive. That's my motto. Stay positive. Good things will happen. Because like I said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying right here. I enjoy what I do. I do it for the people who love horror like I love horror. So that's why I decided to create this channel that I have right now. And like I said, I made a lot of wonderful people. My subscribers love what I do. And I'm going to continue to do what I do. And I have other plans that I want to do for my channel as well. So I'm not going anywhere. I will not let this stop me. And just like we have galvanized last year, we galvanized this event that happened today with the horror family. Vicky knows what we did today. And it really, really pumped everyone up and, got everybody energized again. So like I said before, just stay positive. Don't let this discourage you, and just continue to do what we do. And we're not going anywhere. We're staying right here. We're going to fight the good fight, and we will become the big boys, sooner or later.
Oh no, I mean I agree with everything that all of you guys are saying. It's just I hate censorship in any form, and I realize there are going to be some things that are more sensitive to others, and that people will find offensive or not offensive, and it just comes down to, again, in my opinion, it appears that society has lost the will to speak for their own. There are a lot of things that I see on TV, that I hear on the radio and things like that I don't like them. It doesn't mean I'm going to go out and make a mass protest and tell other people that they can't enjoy what it is that they enjoy. So I'm glad that you all came on to discuss this subject, and I think we kept it pretty even-tempered. I mean, we could have sat here for an hour and cussed out YouTube if we wanted to, and YouTube couldn't do anything about it. But I do think it's an important thing that we brought up to everybody. And again, I want to thank you all for being on. Now, before I let all of you go, starting with you, Monty, please tell everyone where they can find you, Facebook, social media, anything like that, and we'll just take it from there.
All right. Like I said, my real name is Lamont Smith. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and on Stardust now. There's a new app called Stardust now. My channel is called the Horror Miser Monty G. I review horror movies, horror TV show recaps, and other things horror related. The latest thing I'll be doing, hopefully by tomorrow, I will have a review of one of my favorite old school horror movies called The Car.
Yes.
One of my favorites, because I'm old school horror, because I grew up on horror, and that's one of my favorite old school. So I'm going to do a review of The Car tomorrow.
Excellent. Ian.
You can find me at Catch Me Kill Me, that's all one word productions on Facebook, and Catch Me Kill Me on Instagram. And if you want to come and meet me and some other people, we'll be at Mad Monster in North Carolina, February 16th.
Just so you know, you should stay in North Carolina for another week, because the following week is the Nevermore Film Festival in Durham, North Carolina.
I'll tell my producer that.
I mean, it's a big 3-day event. You guys should definitely come out for that one.
Yeah, that'd be fun. That'd be fun, man. Maybe we will.
Definitely. Vicky.
You can find me anywhere, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube as Nightmare Maven. I also write on Morbidly Beautiful as well, under Nightmare Maven or Vicky Cirello. And you'll also see me on Morbidly Beautiful's YouTube channel next month for Women in Horror Month, so stay tuned for that.
Oh yes, we're gonna be busy next month. There's no doubt about that.
I'm going to check that out, Vicky.
pumped for it.
Well, guys, again, you know, I want to thank you for being on. I want to thank you for being so passionate about this subject. You know, Vicky, I have to thank you for bringing this to my attention. Again, like I said, I'm not as big in terms of a following on YouTube yet, but you know, there is going to come a day when I have a feeling this will affect me. And you know, Monty, for you, you know, like I said, your video was very enlightening, and it was refreshing to see how you handled the entire thing. You could have really gone off the rails and just blasted them, but you kept it informative, you kept it real, and you discussed it in an intelligent manner that probably many other content creators may not have done. You know,
it's like this. I like I said, 55 in August. I you know, I'm not going to solve anything just by cursing somebody out, you know?
Right.
You know, you can have a frank discussion about something that you have with and do it in an intelligent way. You know, that's how I was raised, you know, and there was no need to do a curse video. I just did a nice rant and even in a nice, intelligent way.
Well, like I said, I mean, it was good to see. It's nice to see level-headed people in our industry who can articulate a point without making the rest of us look bad. It is appreciated. Ian,
the last thing you need to do is have somebody do that because the hard people again, they don't know what they're talking about.
we have enough of that in the world as it is, right?
Yeah.
You know, Ian, you know, I want to thank you for being on. I thought it was very important to have a filmmaker on who puts his stuff on YouTube for the world to see so that people can learn who you are and explore, you know, your visual content to expand the horror genre. You know, keep doing what you're doing, man. I enjoy your work. I'm glad to see you on YouTube, and I hope that you start to get more of the views and get out there even more so that people can see your amazing work.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. It's cool to have the kind of platform to kind of give my opinion on something that seems to be kind of present in the community. And I really like the work, and I hope that the more people see it, the more people like it. Because it's definitely a passion. I've been doing this for a while now, and it just seems now that I'm putting my foot on the mountain to get that foothold. So it's pretty crazy, but I appreciate the support. Thank you for giving me the time tonight.
No problem. And just so you guys know, I mean, you're always welcome at Morbidly Beautiful. If Ian and Monty, I know you guys know that if you have anything you want us to cover, you can always contact Vicky or I. We'll get the stuff up on Morbidly Beautiful. And, of course, you all know that you're always welcome on this podcast. Don't be surprised if you hear from me again in the future about being on for another roundtable discussion, or if I have you on as individuals to talk more in depth about your own personal work.
Well, yeah, it's yours. I'm always available.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Me too. Thank
Well,
you so much.
no problem, guys, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, here's all right, Vicky.
There.
And once again, we want to say thank you to our guests, Morbidly Beautiful journalist and HorrorTuber Vicky Cirello, filmmaker Ian Messenger, and HorrorTuber Lamont Smith, better known as Horror Miser Monty G. Coming up in just a few moments, we're going to go into our second Digital Dismemberment Spotlight for the evening, where we talk about Scream Factory's Blu-ray release of The Return of the Living Dead. But before that, we're going to go into our final Metal Massacre Spotlight this evening. The name of the band is the Black Dahlia Murder. The CD is Ever Black, and the song is Map of Scars. welcome back. You just heard The Black Dahlia Murder. The CD was Ever Black, and the song was Map of Scars. The Black Dahlia Murder is an American death metal band from Waterford, Michigan, formed in 2001. Their name is derived from the 1947 unsolved murder of Elizabeth Short, often referred to as the Black Dahlia. To find out more information about this band, where they're touring, and how to pick up their merchandise and CDs, head on over to www.tbdmofficial.com. But now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our final digital dismemberment. And in our final digital dismemberment spotlight this evening, we are covering Scream Factory's Blu-ray release of The Return of the Living Dead. Once again, another classic. The film was directed by Dan O'Bannon, produced by Tom Fox and Graham Henderson. Special effects were handled by Bob McCarthy, Kevin McCarthy, Tony Gardner, and Alan A. Apone. The cast includes Clu Gallagher, James Karen, Don Calfa, Tom Matthews, Beverly Rudolph, John Philbin, Jewel Shepard, Miguel Nunez Jr., Brian Peck, Linnea Quigley, Mark Venturatorini, Jonathan Terry, and Kathleen Cordell. The film was released by Scream Shout Factory, and the release date was 7/19 of 2016. The premise: on his first day on the job at a medical supply warehouse, poor Freddy unwillingly releases toxic gas from a secret U.S. military canister, unleashing an unbelievable terror. The gas reanimates an army of corpses who arise from their graves with a ravenous hunger for human brains. Now, spoiler alerts, of course. This cult classic started as a novel by John Russo, but production had to be held up for a bit while legal matters concerning the title were worked out. When Russo and George A. Romero went their own ways after Night of the Living Dead, Russo retained the rights to any titles featuring Living Dead, while Romero went on to create his own series of sequels, beginning with Dawn of the Dead. The original plan was to make The Return of the Living Dead in 3D with Tobe Hooper directing, but due to outside projects, Hooper had to bow out and Dan O'Bannon was brought in. The original story was much more serious, but O'Bannon changed the script and injected humor into parts of it while maintaining the much-needed gore. The other thing that makes The Return of the Living Dead stand out is the fact that it was the first zombie film where the zombies attacked people specifically for their brains. In addition to that, the zombies also talked and could run like the average person, adding a level of intelligence and movement that made the hordes that much more dangerous. The soundtrack, which is primarily punk, powers the movie along and sets the tone for the glorious acts of violence by the zombies. The acting is quite capable and believable, making you care about all those involved. While a tough shoot by all accounts and interviews, the film is warmly remembered by the cast and crew, and a film that has left a mark on zombies and the horror genre overall. As the film opens, we see Frank training Freddy inside the Unita Medical Supply Company right before the 4th of July. Bert, the owner, wishes them a good holiday and leaves for the evening. Frank tells Freddy takes him around to everything, even showing him a cadaver in cold storage. Seeing that Freddy is shaken a bit, Frank asks him if he remembers the film Night of the Living Dead, and tells him that it was a true story that the filmmaker had to change the real details. He even tells Freddy that the army accidentally shipped a couple of containers with corpses to the facility, which were in the basement. They go down and examine the containers, but when Freddy questions whether or not they are safe, Frank hits a container in the side. They are both sprayed by the noxious gas, knocking them out. When they come to, they head upstairs and start to hear odd noises. A bisected dog comes to life, and they beat it with a crutch until they hear noises coming from the cooler. Realizing that the body in cold storage is now alive, they call Bert in a panic to help them deal with the situation.
After an epic fight that includes a pickaxe to the cranium and then the beheading of the corpse with a bone saw, the body and head continue to live, even though Frank is sure that destroying the brain will stop it. They then dismember the corpse and try to come up with a way to dispose of it. Meanwhile, Freddy's girlfriend Tina and their group of punk friends are looking for something to do until Freddy gets off of work. After driving around for a bit, they find an old cemetery nearby and they break into it to hang out. Things start to get crazy as Trash strips and then starts dancing nude on a crypt, much to the delight of everyone else. While they continue to wait for Freddy, Bert decides to call in a favor from the local mortician Ernie, and they take the corpse over to the funeral home. Bert tries to tell Ernie that they have a bag of rabid weasels that they need to burn in the oven, but Ernie eventually convinces them to tell him what is really going on. After getting over the initial shock of seeing the dismembered corpse moving around, he agrees to burn the remains into ash. After thinking they have resolved the problem, Freddy and Frank start to become very sick and pale. Ernie calls for paramedics as it starts to storm, but little do they know that the gases from the burning body have entered the air and are now coming down in the town in the form of an acid rain. Tina and her friends run for their car as the rain starts to burn their skin, but the car will not start. Tina leaves to get Freddy, but she can't find him at the supply company. She heads downstairs and is confronted by the Tarman zombie, who forces her to hide in a closet. The rest of her friends make their way to the company to look for her, and they hear her screams in the basement. Upon arriving, Suicide has his skull bitten into by the Tarman, and the rest of the group runs back into the cemetery to try and get away. They become separated, and Trash is attacked by a group of zombies and devoured. Tina, Spider, and Scuzz make their way to the funeral home and tell everyone there what is happening outside, while Casey and Chuck hide out in the medical supply company. Meanwhile, the zombies have attacked the paramedics and lay in wait for the police that are on their way. Freddy and Frank continue to turn into zombies, with Freddy eventually trying to chase Tina down and eat her brains. Bert and Spider try to make a run for the car to try and get everyone out, but they cannot make it back to them. Bert eventually decides to call the number on the side of one of the canisters. Once the call goes in, the military decides to handle the situation the only way they can. A tactical nuclear strike to try and contain the outbreak to one location. Things become even more dire as Ernie and Tina hide in a crawl space, even as Freddy, now blinded by acid, tries to attack them both. Does anybody survive, and is the outbreak contained? You will have to watch and see. The special features on this include a 2K scan of the inner positive, a new audio commentary with Gary Smart, who is the co-author of The Complete History of the Return of the Living Dead, and Chris Griffiths. New audio commentary with actor Tom Matthews, John Philbin, and makeup effects artist Tony Gardner. There's also a commentary with director Dan O'Bannon and production designer William Stout. And there's also a commentary with the cast and crew featuring production designer William Stout and actors Don Calfa, Linnea Quigley, Brian Peck, Beverly Randolph, and Alan Troutman. There's a Decades of Darkness featurette on 80s horror films. It runs about 23 minutes. There's the theatrical trailers, TV spots. There's also a still gallery with posters, lobby cards, movie stills, and behind-the-scenes photos. There's another still gallery that's behind-the-scenes photos from makeup special effects artist Kenny Meyer's personal collection. There are zombie subtitles for the film, and in their own words, the zombies speak. That's all on Disc 1. Disc 2 includes the effects of the living dead with production designer William Stout, FX makeup artist William Munns, Tony Gardner, Kenny Myers, and Craig Catton-Lardnet, visual effects artist Brent Mixon, and Gene Warren Jr. and actor Brian Peck. It runs about 30 minutes. There's another one entitled Party Time, the music of Return of the Living Dead, with music consultants Bud Carr and Steve Pross, and soundtrack artist Dina Cancer from 45 Grave, Chris D. from The Flesh Eaters, Roki Erickson, Carl Mowat from SSQ, Joe Wood, TSLOL, Mark Robertson from Tall Boys, plus musicians Greg Hetson from Circle Jerks and John Socks, the FUs and Straw Dogs. That's about 30 minutes. There is a Horror's Hollow Ground, revisiting the locations of the film. There is a work print that includes 20 minutes of additional footage in standard definition. And there is the 120-minute long More Brains, a Return to the Living Dead documentary. There's a conversation with Dan O'Bannon, which was his final interview, which runs about 30 minutes. There's the Origins of the Living Dead, a 16-minute interview with John A. Russo. The Return of the Living Dead, The Dead Has Risen, interviews with cast members Clu Gallagher, James Karen, Don Calfa, Brian Peck, Tom Matthews, Beverly Randolph, Linnea Quigley, and more. And that's about 21 minutes. And Designing the Dead, and it's interviews with writer-director Dan O'Bannon and production designer William Stout. That runs about 15 minutes. This is a 2-disc set. The aspect ratio is 1080p high-definition widescreen, 185:1. Scream Factory has once again given us the definitive version of a cult classic. The 2K transfer is stunning, with very little grain or wear on the print, and boasting the rich colors that I have always associated with this film. The audio is also top-notch, with the punk soundtrack blasting through the speakers with precision. The flip cover artwork is stunning as well, with both the original artwork as well as a new cover for this release. Personally, I love the new artwork. With well over 4 hours of bonus features that include several featurettes, interviews, including an interview with Dan O'Bannon, who passed away several years before this particular release, trailers, TV spots, and photo galleries, you will be hard-pressed to find not only another version of this film with this many goodies, but a Blu-ray in general that holds up to a strict collector's eye. A film that changed how we view humor and horror, Return of the Living Dead is a must-own for any genre fan as well as anyone who loves zombies. Once again, a must-own film. I give the film itself a 4 out of 5, the Blu-ray a 10 out of 10. Again, this is an absolutely outstanding release. Make sure to head on over to Scream Factory or ShoutFactory.com to pick up your copy of the Blu-ray release of The Return of the Living Dead. Once again, I think we had an absolutely fantastic episode. I want to say thank you again to fellow Morbidly Beautiful journalist and HorrorTuber Vicky Cirello, Filmmaker Ian Messenger, and HorrorTuber Lamont Smith, a.k.a. Horror Miser Monty G. I want to say thank you to Cult Epics for sending us our Blu-ray copy of George Buttgereit's Nekromantik, and thank you to Scream Factory for sending us our copy of Dan O'Bannon's The Return of the Living Dead. I also want to say thank you to the 3 bands in our Metal Massacre Spotlights this evening. Those bands included Infant Annihilator, the Black Dahlia Murders, and Crest of Darkness. Make sure to tune in next week, and make sure to tune in on Tuesday nights here on morbidlybeautiful.com and Friday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific on Mile High Radio. And until next week, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Dead Man telling you all to rest in peace.